Hey, it's Wendy Pearl with Penguin Random House, and I'm going to tell you about two novels you can get at Orinda Books right now. These are great novels that I love that have come out recently and that I think are the right books to read right now. They add a lot to the conversation of race and privilege and identity in America. The first novel is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This just went on sale a week ago and it's already #1 on all the bestseller lists. It is about two identical twin sisters, Desiree and Stella, light-skinned black women growing up in a small southern town in the 1950s. They run away to New Orleans when they're 16, and they end up taking two paths in their lives. So Desiree she lives her life as a black woman, and Stella, after being in New Orleans for a while, just disappears. She vanishes into thin air, cuts all ties. She goes on to live her life passing as a white woman. So the story opens in 1968 when Desiree is coming home, coming back to the southern town from DC after a failed marriage, bringing her daughter with her, who is a very dark-skinned black girl, unlike Desiree. And it's their life in this small town in the 60s during the civil rights movement and into the 70s. And then the other part of the book, the other narrative, is about Stella, who is now living as a privileged, wealthy white woman in a community, upscale community in Southern California. She too has a daughter, and of course, great narrative plot line, lives intertwine. It's crazy that this book was written in a time period 50 years ago and yet is more relevant than ever. Lots of great reviews for this, by the way, NPR, New York Times, you name it. The second book, some of you may have read because it came out in January, but it's, again, so important and relevant. Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. This is about Amira, and she is 26. She's black. She's a babysitter nanny trying to figure out her life, and she works for this privileged white family in Philadelphia. The beginning of the novel, she takes the little girl that she babysits into an upscale grocery store. She's followed around the store by the security guard and is then accused of kidnapping this little girl. There's a young man nearby that's got an iPhone, and he videotapes this happening, and eventually Amira unwittingly becomes the poster child for racial profiling, much to her dismay. That's the kernel of the novel that weaves throughout Such a Fun Age, up until this very climactic ending that will have you on the edge of your seat the last 50 pages. There's a lot of other interesting plot lines. The relationships are so wonderfully written, especially between Amira and Alex, her employer, who again is a liberal, wealthy white woman who thinks she's doing all the right things and saying all the right things, and yet is making a lot of missteps along the way. So under the surface of this incredibly compelling book, there's a lot to learn and almost some cringeworthy things about microaggression and implicit bias and transactional relationships, very similar to the kind of books that Celestine writes and does so well, like Little Fires Everywhere. So both of these available at Orinda Books. Thanks.